When people talk about really high-level tactical matchups, whether it's like in business or military strategy or sports, they almost always use the exact same metaphor.
Yeah, the chess match.
Exactly. They call it a game of chess.
Hmm.
You picture these two grandmasters sitting in pin-drop silence, carefully calculating variables like 10 moves ahead.
Right, because it's highly intellectual, it's controlled, it's deeply rational. I mean, we love to believe that the systems we build are perfectly insulated from chaos.
We really do. But then you take that chessboard, right, and you place it right in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah,
You surround it with 82,500 screaming people, and suddenly those perfectly calculated moves they start to break down
they
entirely.
absolutely do.
So today we're doing a deep dive into the ultimate clash of chaos and calculation. We're looking at the World Cup final between Spain and Argentina.
Such a wild match.
It really was. We are pulling from this massive stack of tactical analyses, on-the-ground match reports, and even post-game physiological data. And the mission today is to figure out how a game that started as a highly intellectual chess match just completely devolved into this grueling, bad-tempered physical war.
Yeah, and the Meadowlands provided the perfect theater for this too.
Oh, the New York, New Jersey Stadium.
Right. I mean, looking at the data, this wasn't just a match to decide a world champion. This is a night that permanently rewrote the tactical and, frankly, the psychological blueprint of football.
Totally.
You had two completely opposing philosophies just colliding on the pitch.
Yeah.
And the tension that erupted later on, that was built directly into those contrasting playstyles from minute one.
Well, let's unpack those first 90 minutes then, because to understand the unadulterated chaos of the finale, we kind of have to start by analyzing the agonizing 0-0 deadlock of regular time.
Right, the stalemate.
Yeah. Let's look at Spain first, managed by Luis de la Fuente. The consensus across the sources is that they operated as this undefeated machine. Like, they used this incredibly aggressive vertical press to basically choke out passing lanes and control the velocity of the game.
Yes.
Now, for anyone who, doesn't spend their weekends diagramming football formations, how does a vertical press actually function mechanically? I mean, how is it different from a normal press?
Well, okay, so in a standard pressing system, right, a team loses the ball, and they might fall back into a predetermined shape.
Right.
They kind of focus on guarding zones. But a vertical press is much more predatory.
Predatory.
Yeah. The moment Spain loses possession, their forwards and midfielders, they don't retreat at all. They just sprint directly forward at the opposing ball carrier.
Wow, so they're just instantly swarming.
Exactly. They force the opponent to make these rushed backward passes. They are essentially shrinking the usable area of the pitch, like second by second.
So they're completely dictating the pace.
Yeah, they dictate the rhythm entirely. They decide when the game slows down to a crawl and when it accelerates into this blinding attack.
So Spain's possession strategy acts less like a traditional football team and more like a boa constrictor.
That's a great way to put it.
It's just slowly, methodically tightening its grip. Like every time the opponent tries to breathe or expand their shape, Spain just squeezes a little tighter, choking off the space.
And what makes that constrictor so deadly is how it forces the opposition to react. Because Argentina, managed by Lionel Scaloni, they brought an entirely different survival mechanism to this.
Right, the low block.
Yeah, they deployed a punishing, highly physical low block.
So if Spain is a boa constrictor, Argentina built a reinforced concrete bunker.
Exactly.
Like, they were completely content to let Spain squeeze because they fundamentally believed their structure could not be crushed. They designed this low block to maintain total structural compactness and just withstand that relentless pressure for 90 minutes.
And we really should break down why executing a low block like that is so physically and mentally draining.
Yeah, please do.
Because to a casual viewer, it looks defensive, right? Almost passive.
It just looks like they're standing around in a wall.
Right. But it requires microscopic discipline from every single player. You are constantly shifting side to side in unison. You're tracking secondary runs, maintaining a perfectly straight defensive line.
Which sounds exhausting.
Oh, it is. And you're physically absorbing the impact of oncoming attackers.
Yeah.
It is basically synchronized swimming on grass, but with 200-pound athletes launching themselves at you. One step out of place, One lapse in concentration, and the bunker collapses entirely.
Which brings me to the absolute wild card in Spain's system, because they had a weapon specifically designed to crack that bunker, right? Their 19-year-old prodigy, Lamine Yamal,
Oh, yes. Yamal again.
he was operating on the right wing. And the tactical reports describe his role as an asymmetrical dynamic engine who was just constantly forcing Argentina out of shape.
Yes.
But, like, how does a 19-year-old function as an asymmetrical engine against a punishing veteran defense without getting completely shut down?
Well, mechanically, it's brilliant because it attacks the core premise of Argentina's bunker. A low block relies heavily on symmetry and predictability.
Right, knowing where people are.
Exactly. It relies on knowing exactly where the threats are, confined to these predictable zones. But Yamal's role was to deliberately break that symmetry.
So he wasn't playing like a normal winger.
No, not at all. Instead of just running up and down the sideline like a traditional winger, he drifts. He moves into central areas. He drops deep into the midfield. He just floats between the rigid lines of Argentina's defense.
So following that architecture analogy, if Argentina's defense is a concrete bunker, Yamal isn't a battering ram. He is like water seeping into the microscopic cracks.
That's it. He finds the hairline fractures, and by doing that, he forces those veteran defenders into a terrible choice. Well, do they step out of their rigid structure to follow him, thereby creating a massive hole in the bunker? Or do they hold their line and let a generational talent just roam free with the ball at his feet?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a nightmare for a defender.
He is the variable they simply cannot calculate.
And for 90 grueling minutes, that was the entire dynamic. Spain squeezing, Yamal probing, Argentina just absorbing the blows, the scoreboard read an agonizing 0-0.
The predictive supercomputers that analysts love to use literally ran out of answers for breaking the deadlock.
Right. And the players are completely drained of glucose by this point. They're barely holding on to their sanity. In a normal match, this is the moment where the 90-minute whistle blows and the players finally get a reprieve before extra time.
A chance to breathe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But FIFA decided to do something completely unprecedented here.
Yeah, the environmental shift here is just staggering. We kind of step away from the tactical board and into a massive sensory bombardment.
It's totally wild. FIFA completely changed the rules of engagement for this specific final. Normally, you'd get a quick, quiet break before extra time, right?
Right.
Instead, FIFA jammed a massive Super Bowl-style halftime show right onto the pitch between regular time and extra time.
Unbelievable.
They brought out global icons, Justin Bieber, Shakira, BTS, delivering this unbelievable spectacle to an arena packed to its exact capacity of 82,500 people.
And you really have to consider the neuroscience of this decision.
Yeah.
Because the break before extra time is traditionally a sanctuary. It's a quiet locker room or maybe a calm huddle on the pitch.
Yeah.
Your brain gets a chance to lower its cortisol levels. You get ice on your legs. You hydrate. The manager makes a few calm tactical adjustments.
You try to remember your own name after chasing shadows for an hour and a half.
Precisely. But here you have players who have just fought a 90-minute intellectual and physical war. They're trying to maintain the extreme cognitive focus required for a low block or a vertical press. And suddenly, the stadium turns into a global pop concert. I mean, the ground is literally vibrating from the bass.
Oh, man.
The strobe lights, the fireworks, the sheer volume of the music. It is a massive cognitive disruption. The brain cannot enter recovery mode when the environment is signaling a high-threat, high-stimulus event like that.
And the spectacle wasn't just on the grass either. The sources point out that the pop culture crossover extended all the way up to the VIP boxes. U.S. President Donald Trump was in attendance, sitting right alongside FIFA's president, Gianni Infantino.
Right.
They were up there just waiting to hand over the ultimate prize in global sports. So the visual, political, and cultural stakes were pushed to their absolute maximum limit.
Yeah.
So essentially, you are asking brains and bodies that are running on fumes, that have just been subjected to a literal rock concert, to immediately lock back into that game of Grandmaster chess for 30 more minutes.
It requires an almost superhuman psychological reset. The human nervous system simply isn't designed to transition from a 90-minute athletic marathon into an overwhelming sensory assault and then back into a state of hyper-focused tactical execution.
And spoiler alert, they couldn't do it.
No.
Which brings us to the 93rd minute fracture. They step out of the pop concert spectacle. We go into the first period of extra time. And all of that built-up psychological and physical tension just violently snaps.
It had to.
Just 3 minutes into extra time, the turning point arrives. Argentina's Enzo Fernandez makes a late, desperate sliding challenge, and the referee pulls out a fatal second yellow card.
Which means a red card.
Right. Argentina is suddenly reduced to 10 men. In an instant, that reinforced concrete bunker, their entire tactical framework, is just fractured.
It is the moment the geometry of the game fundamentally breaks. When you're playing a low block, every single player is a load-bearing pillar.
Okay, yeah.
So you remove one, and the structural integrity collapses. You suddenly have to cover 10% more space against a team that specializes in suffocating you.
Now, I want to push back on the narrative surrounding this moment, though, because a lot of the commentary in the sources debated whether these late red cards robbed Argentina of their title defense or if Spain's victory was totally deserved.
It was a huge debate.
But from a tactical standpoint, didn't Spain's relentless, systematic vertical press inevitably force that exact kind of desperate error? Like, can we really call it a robbery if Spain's strategy was explicitly designed to exhaust Argentina into making a mistake?
That gets to the core of how fatigue operates in elite sports, honestly. We tend to view a late, reckless tackle as an isolated bad decision. A moment of individual madness or bad temper.
Right, like he just lost his head.
Exactly. But if we analyze the mechanics of Spain's boa constrictor press, the exhaustion isn't just accumulating in the muscles. It's devastating the central nervous system.
It's the cognitive load we were talking about earlier, compounded by that halftime show.
Think about what it takes to spend 93 minutes constantly adjusting your position by fractions of an inch. Your brain is burning immense amounts of glucose just to maintain that spatial awareness.
Wow.
So as the lactic acid builds up in your muscles, your neural pathways literally become sluggish. Your reaction time slows down by vital milliseconds.
So he was just physically too slow.
Yeah, Fernandez's tackle was late, not necessarily because he lost his temper in a vacuum, but because his brain and his legs were no longer communicating at the speed required to intercept a Spanish pass. Spain's entire system is engineered to create exactly that kind of physiological failure.
So it's not bad luck, and it's not the referee stealing the game, it's the boa constrictor finally cutting off the last bit of circulation.
Exactly.
The mistake is a feature, not a bug, of Spain's tactic.
They bank on the biological reality that human beings cannot maintain perfection forever under that kind of duress. The system relies on the opponent's nervous system eventually misfiring.
So, with Argentina's defensive structure finally broken and that load-bearing pillar removed, Spain didn't just sit back. They capitalized on the fracture with surgical precision.
They really did.
Seeing blood in the water, Luis de la Fuente executed this masterclass substitution. He brings on Ferran Torres to puncture that tiring 10-man Argentinian line.
And it pays off instantly.
Instantly. In the 106th minute, Torres picks up a lethal cross. He finds a microscopic gap in the defense, a gap that probably wouldn't have existed 15 minutes earlier, and he slices the ball into the back of the net.
What a moment.
1-0 Spain. The Spanish contingent in the stands just erupts into absolute madness.
It's the ultimate validation of their blueprint,
Yeah.
They probed, they squeezed, they sent Yamal into the cracks, and they waited over 100 minutes until that microscopic gap finally appeared.
But what happens next is what makes this final so historic, and honestly, so chaotic, because the match doesn't just end with a tactical masterclass.
No, it gets ugly.
As the final seconds tick down, tempers boil over entirely. A massive, multiplayer brawl erupts near the touchline, and this results in a straight red card for Argentina's Leandro Paredes.
Yeah?
Now, how does a team that just spent 90 minutes demonstrating the absolute pinnacle of disciplined structural compactness suddenly devolve into a street fight?
Well, we have to look at the biology of the brawl. For an elite player, the tactical system, that concrete bunker, is what keeps you safe. You trust the structure. It organizes your aggression.
Right.
But consider what happens physiologically over 106 minutes. The body is constantly pumping adrenaline and cortisol to maintain that fight-or-flight readiness. But the tactical discipline requires you to suppress the fight impulse and hold your position.
Just bottling up the hurricane.
You are bottling it up for hours. When that structure fractures and you concede a goal in the 106th minute of a World Cup final, you experience a profound loss of control. The safety net is totally gone. The realization sets in that the excruciating sacrifice has failed.
So the brain essentially short circuits.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logical decision-making and impulse control, essentially shuts down due to extreme fatigue and emotional devastation.
Wow.
The brain defaults to its most primitive function, the amygdala. The unreleased adrenaline has nowhere constructive to go, so it manifests as physical conflict. The tactical breakdown directly causes the biological breakdown.
That makes so much sense.
The brawl is simply the visual representation of a broken system.
The structure held their emotions in check just as much as it held Spain's attackers in check. And when the final whistle finally blew, that chaotic warfare on the pitch gave way to an emotional contrast that is genuinely hard to process. You have these dual simultaneous scenes unfolding on the grass.
The visual, the aftermath, perfectly captures the brutal reality of a zero-sum game.
It really does. On one side, you have the formal, glittering ceremony. President Donald Trump steps out of the VIP box and onto the pitch to hand the shimmering gold trophy to the triumphant Spanish team, officially closing the book and securing their second historical World Cup crown.
It's the pinnacle of global glory.
Confetti falling, cameras flashing.
A picture of total structural success.
But simultaneously, the cameras lock onto Lionel Messi, and he is walking off his historic final World Cup pitch in floods of tears. It is an ultimate international farewell ending in brutal devastation.
Yeah.
The highest of highs, right next to the most crushing of lows, all happening on the exact same plot of grass.
And, the systems, the supercomputers, the VIPs, the pop concert halftime shows, all of the infrastructure of modern sports ultimately funnels down into one group of young men lifting a piece of gold and another group walking away with absolutely nothing.
Which actually brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, based on a detail we held back from the sources until now. Think about this for a second.
Okay.
This tournament was the dawn of the expanded 48-team era. It took 104 grueling matches to supposedly eliminate all the variables.
Right, a massive expansion.
FIFA built the biggest, most expansive system in sports history to mathematically isolate and control the outcome, right? To find the undisputed best team on the planet.
They engineered an unprecedented global tournament.
Yet, after all that massive structural expansion by FIFA, the entire championship wasn't decided by a grand tactical blueprint. It wasn't decided by a predictive supercomputer or the star power in the VIP box or the millions of dollars spent on tactical analysis.
No.
It was decided by a single, desperate, split-second sliding tackle by a completely exhausted human being in the 93rd minute. It leaves you wondering, no matter how big you build the system, no matter how much you try to engineer the game of Grandmaster Chess Kiv, human error is always the ultimate decider.
It always comes back to the human element. The hurricane always disrupts the chessboard.
Well said. Thanks for doing this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll catch you next time.